Bloomberg Audio Studios.
Podcasts, radio, news.
Good morning, I'm Nathan Hager.
And I'm Amy Morris. Here are the stories we're following today.
We begin in Washington, where another partial government shutdown deadline is fast approaching. Lawmakers have till midnight Friday to reach an agreement on 4 of their 12 annual funding bills. Today, President Biden is meeting with congressional leaders to try to break the impasse and unlock billions of dollars in foreign aid. Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer says he is hopeful they can get to a deal.
While we've made some good progress on a number of fronts, unfortunately, our House Republican colleagues are still struggling to figure themselves out. There's a lot of uncertainty over how the House will proceed in the coming days.
Till then, Majority Leader Chuck Schumer is telling senators to keep their schedules flexible.
Meanwhile, a deal may be getting closer in the Middle East as Bloomberg's Ed Baxter reports there's new hope for a ceasefire between Israel and Hamas.
President Joe Biden says he hopes a ceasefire between Israel and Hamas can take effect by early next week.
My national security advisor tells me that we're close. We're close. It's not done yet. And my hope is by next Monday, we'll have a ceasefire.
And State Department spokesman Matthew Miller says details are being worked out for the hostage release.
It depends on Hamas. We believe a deal is possible, and we hope Hamas will agree to one.
And they hope to have the final plan by the weekend. Ed Baxter, Bloomberg Radio.
All right, Ed, thank you. Now, President Biden's support for Israel is threatening his own political support as he ramps up his re-election campaign. Michigan is holding its primary today. Much of that state's Arab American population blames Biden for failing to stop the war in Gaza. There's a grassroots push in Michigan to vote uncommitted instead of for Biden today to send him a message about his handling of the crisis.
Meanwhile, the president was in New York City last night for campaign events, and he took on the age question during an appearance on NBC's Late Night with Seth Meyers.
It's about how old your ideas are. Look, I mean, this is a guy who wants to take us back. He wants to take us back on Roe v. Wade. He wants to take us back on a whole range of issues that are 50, 60 years. They've been solid American positions.
The president also referred to an episode where former President Trump appeared to call his wife by a different name, although he may have been referring to someone else in the crowd at that event. An NBC News poll from January found 3 in 4 voters had concerns about Biden's age. Less than half said the same about Donald Trump.
All right, let's turn back to markets now, Amy. For the first time in more than 2 years, Bitcoin has passed the 57,000 level. Let's get the latest now from Bloomberg's John Tucker. John.
And Nate, the introduction of those Bitcoin ETFs earlier this year, that's a big part of the reason for this jump. $6.1 billion has poured into Bitcoin ETFs. They began trading in the U.S. on January 11th. We also have this upcoming reduction in Bitcoin supply growth, the halving. A MicroStrategy, an enterprise software firm, says it's purchased another 3,000 or so tokens this month. Bitcoin has outperformed traditional assets like stocks and gold this year. Shares of crypto-related companies also gained in yesterday's trading. Trading platform Coinbase Global, for instance, increased 17%. Bitcoin has paired some of the earlier gains, now just under $57,000 per token. I'm John Tucker, Bloomberg Radio.
All right, thank you, John. And Bitcoin, not the only thing on the rise this morning. Shares of Zoom Video are up more than 10% in early trading. We get that story from Bloomberg's Kimberly Adams.
The video conference provider reported quarterly sales and profit that top analyst estimates. Zoom also announced a 1.5 billion share buyback. After hyper-growth during the pandemic, Zoom had experienced a dramatic sales slowdown amid competition for business customers and the departure of consumers from the video conferencing platform. In the hopes of capturing more corporate clients, Zoom has expanded its product line to include phone systems, call centers, and AI assistants. Zoom says contact center licenses have tripled over the last year, and about 500,000 accounts enabled Zoom's AI-free companion. Kimberly Adams, Bloomberg Radio.
All right, Kim, thanks. We'll talk about trading places. Bloomberg News has learned the fast fashion company Shein is considering the possibility of switching its initial public offering to London from New York because of hurdles getting it listed in the U.S. We get more from Bloomberg Markets reporter Sam Onstead.
It would be an enormous IPO. I mean, even at the lower end of their valuation, they would be about the 16th, 17th biggest company in London if they did list. Their first choice very much New York, as it should be. They're a tech-driven retailer, so their valuation will be a lot higher. Their liquidity pool's a lot higher. But they think there's going to be issues in getting past the SEC. So it may well be that what you see here, if they do indeed choose London instead of, say, Hong Kong or Singapore, is they get the listing done, but don't necessarily particularly love being here and may well eventually kind of shift themselves over to either New York, Hong Kong, Singapore, larger markets with more liquidity.
Bloomberg Markets reporter Sam Unstead there in London. He notes Cheyenne was founded in China, but is now headquartered in Singapore.
Turning to the economy, another Fed official urging caution when it comes to cutting interest rates. Kansas City Fed President Jeffrey Schmidt says the central bank should be patient with inflation above the Fed's 2% target and the job market still strong. In his first major speech since taking the job 6 months ago, Schmidt also said he is in no hurry to stop the ongoing reduction of the Fed's balance sheet.
In Asia, Japan's 2-year bond yield climbed to its highest level in more than a decade. Stronger than expected inflation data are boosting bets that the Bank of Japan will end its negative interest rate policy in coming months.
And in China, state-backed funds have poured more than $57 billion into onshore shares this year in a bid to prop up the market. That's according to estimates by UBS, which expects further purchases. The Swiss bank says more than 75% of the inflows went into products tracking the benchmark CSI 300 index.
And Alibaba has led the largest single financing round for a Chinese artificial intelligence startup. It's the latest in a string of sizable investments that suggests the e-commerce firm is again deploying capital in the hunt for growth. Alibaba led a $1 billion funding round in Moonshot AI. That is one of the better-known startups developing generative artificial intelligence in China.
And in Europe, Bloomberg News has learned the UK's Chancellor of the Exchequer, Jeremy Hunt, may announce a new tax on vapes in his budget next week. The levy would apply to both manufacturers and importers. It's being considered part of Prime Minister Rishi Sunak's efforts to crack down on vaping and smoking to protect children's health.
Time now to take a look at some of the other stories making news in New York and around the world. And for that, we're joined by Bloomberg's Michael Barr. Good morning, Michael.
Good morning, Nathan. Reaction comes in as Sweden is now set to follow Finland's footsteps and join NATO. Approval from Hungary's parliament marked the 31st and final member to admit Sweden. It strengthens the alliance in the face of Russia's war with Ukraine. Former U.S. ambassador to NATO, Ivo Dalder.
It now brings NATO closer to Russia's border. Remember, the war with Ukraine was ostensibly started to prevent NATO from coming closer to Russia's border. Well, one way in which you bring NATO closer is when you start attacking other countries and invading them.
Sweden decided to leave behind 200 years of neutrality after Russia invaded Ukraine. Donald Trump's lawyers have filed a notice of appeal in his $454 million New York civil fraud judgment, challenging a judge's finding that he lied about his wealth as he grew his real estate empire. Meanwhile, ahead of Trump's first criminal trial, Manhattan District Attorney Alvin Bragg is asking a judge to impose a partial gag order on the former president. Questions over immigration continue in the case of a nursing student murdered on the University of Georgia campus last week. The older brother of the man charged allegedly showed a fake green card to police as they investigated the woman's death. Both men are from Venezuela. Governor Brian Kemp is demanding answers from President Biden and immigration authorities.
She deserves justice. Her family deserves justice. And we need justice on a national level to prevent this type of thing from happening again.
The older brother has been arrested by Georgia authorities, and the younger brother, accused of murder, has been under arrest in New York City and at the border, but they were paroled or released before customs enforcement agents could step in. The DEA is cracking down on the use of pill presses in its efforts to fight the fentanyl crisis. It warns e-commerce sites to regulate purchases of the presses under current law. In a duplex-turned-drug lab in New York City, DEA Administrator Ann Milgram says agents seized presses along with 200,000 suspected fentanyl pills.
In the last 6 months, we've seized pill presses in New York, in Massachusetts, in Mississippi, in Kentucky. It's an industrial machine.
The DEA's Ann Milgram says many of the machines are purchased online for as little as $40. Students at New York City's Albert Einstein School of Medicine got a welcome surprise. Longtime Board of Trustees Chairwoman Dr. Ruth Gottesman is gifting the school $1 billion to make tuition free for current four-year students and every student enrolling in the future. Dr. Gottesman made the huge donation in the name of her late husband, David Sandy Gottesman, who was an early investor in Berkshire Hathaway. Global news 24 hours a day and whenever you want it with Bloomberg News Now. I'm Michael Barr. This is Bloomberg Nathan.
All right, Michael, thanks. Time now for the Bloomberg Sports Update, brought to you by Tri-State Audi. Here's John Stashauer.
Thanks, Nathan. The Detroit Pistons came into the Garden in NBA worst 8-48. This figured to be an easy win for the Knicks. It was not. In fact, they trailed in the waning seconds when there was a wild sequence that included what the officials later admitted was a missed call. Dante DiVincenzo should have been whistled for a loose ball foul. Detroit should have been at the line up by one. Instead, it was a turnover that led to Josh Hart's game-winning layup with 2 seconds left. The Knicks won 113-111. Here was Pistons coach Monty Williams after the game.
We had a chance to win the game, and the guy dove into Asar's legs, and there was a no call. That's an abomination. You cannot miss that in an NBA game. And I'm tired of talking about it. I'm tired of our guys asking me, what more can we do, coach? That situation is Exhibit A to what we've been dealing with all season long.
Jalen Brunson led the Knicks, 35 points. Cade Cunningham, 32 for Detroit. In Memphis, 7 Nets in double figures. They won easily, 111-86. Just the Nets' 7th win since late December, the first for new coach Kevin Ollie. In Dallas, Bo Horvat scored in overtime. Islanders won 3-2. In Seattle, the Bruins got a hat trick from David Pasternak, but lost in a shootout. College hoops, North Carolina topped Miami, and for the Tar Heels, R.J. Davis, 42 points, the most ever scored at the Heels home arena. In Tampa, Nestor Cortez, injured much of last season, took the mound, gave up 7 hits in less than 3 innings. The Yanks did beat the Twins. The Mets beat the Nationals. Grand slam for Trace Thompson. That's Clay's younger brother. First NFL team to give a player the franchise tag, Cincinnati, and whiteout T. Higgins. The Giants, who franchised Saquon Barkley last year, could do it again, but are not expected to, which would make him a free agent. The NFL says it will not change the rule that when a player fumbles into the end zone, the team loses possession. It's only happened 8 times in the last 6 years. It did happen in a recent playoff game. John Stashauer, Bloomberg Sports. Nathan?
Okay, John, thank you. Let's get right back now to the risk coming out of Washington, D.C. We are just about 3 days away from the next partial government shutdown deadline, and today President Biden is calling congressional leaders to the White House to try to get through the impasse, but he's also got his own re-election in mind, the trip to the southern border later this week and a stop at Late Night Comedy last night. So let's get into it all now. We're joined by Terry Haynes, the founder of Pangea Policy. Terry, as we await this White House meeting, where would you put the risk of partial government shutdown this morning?
Oh, I think it's not likely to happen just yet, Nathan. You know, one of the dynamics always is that they in these self-created crises is that they go away, they go away on a recess, they come back. It takes them a little while to figure out how to shuffle the cards and start playing the game again. And short-term funding extensions have already been bandied around in the House. The situation is very volatile, but I would expect there to be a little bit of an extension before they get to it. I would never underestimate the minority of House Republicans that I always call the purists, wanting to have a government shutdown while the president's delivering his State of the Union address. But I think that's probably less likely right now. So I think we'll get a little bit of kicking in the can before they get down to brass tacks.
So is the bigger deadline then this April 30th deadline when we get across the board spending cuts? Doesn't that become more likely a scenario that we just get to that point?
Absolutely. What the purists who paradoxically are doing a little bit more of what markets might want than anybody else, because they're actually interested in cutting spending and at least looking like they're trying to get a fiscal handle on things. Not much of one, but a little bit is better than a little bit is distinguished from nothing. They basically have to do nothing, and they run up against this April 30th 1% cut across the board deadline, as you suggest. So it becomes, they think their leverage grows the longer this goes on. And that's another reason why I think they probably kick the can a little bit more.
We heard from the president yesterday that he's hopeful that a ceasefire could be coming in Gaza by Monday. We've talked before about the difficulties that the president faces with his own base when it comes to his support for Israel. How could that play into what we see in the Michigan primary later today with a state that has a pretty sizable Arab American population?
Well, you've hit exactly on what on why the president all of a sudden is interested in providing Gaza ceasefire updates. my view of this is pretty simple. The president faces today in Michigan the possibility of having people vote uncommitted, meaning they're not going to vote for him or for anybody else. They're going to vote uncommitted. If that uncommitted reaches, say, 10% of the Michigan electorate, and that's certainly possible. Not even the governor of the state is saying, who's a Democrat, is saying that she thinks it's likely to be a tiny protest vote or anything like that. If it reaches double digits, that's going to shake the White House a little bit. I think the president would be very well served both this week and next week in the State of the Union by laying out exactly who we're for, what we're for, and why we're for, both on Israel and Ukraine and Taiwan. This White House doesn't do that very much, but that time is nigh for him, both as a president and as a candidate.
Just got 30 seconds left, Terry, but we heard the president take on the age question on late night TV last night. What did you make of his framing that it's not about how old you are, but about how old your ideas are?
Well, you gotta. You got to lead with what you got, and that's what he's got, so that's what he's leading with. But I'd urge the White House to work on the message a little bit, because his next comment is, of course, the ideas that he's defending are old too. They've been around 50, 60 years, I think was the clip you guys just ran. So and I'm not criticizing his defense of them. I'm just saying, it's nice to be on television, but you got to do a little bit more than that.
This is Bloomberg Daybreak Today, your morning brief on the stories making news from Wall Street to Washington and beyond.
Look for us on your podcast feed by 6 a.m. Eastern each morning on Apple, Spotify, and anywhere else you get your podcasts.
You can also listen live each morning starting at 5 a.m. Wall Street time on Bloomberg 1130 in New York, Bloomberg 99.1 in Washington, Bloomberg 106.1 in Boston, and Bloomberg 960 in San Francisco.
Our flagship New York station is also available on your Amazon Alexa devices. Just say, Alexa, play Bloomberg 1130.
Plus, listen coast to coast on the Bloomberg Business app, SiriusXM, the iHeartRadio app, and on Bloomberg.com. I'm Nathan Hager.
And I'm Amy Morris. Join us again tomorrow morning for all the news you need to start your day right here on Bloomberg Daybreak.